Hello, everybody. Great to be back with you on Hospitality Talks. I'm Abid Butt. Today's topic is a very, very, very important topic that is getting news feeds front and center, particularly after pandemic. And we've got a fabulous panel that would help us understand the role of social responsibility in travel and tourism businesses. As history can attest, well-meaning governments and nonprofits aren't enough on their own to fix every societal issue. It is unlikely that we will find a silver bullet that single-handedly eradicates poverty, inequality, and infuse the workplace with jobs that make workers feel dignified and purposeful. As a result, the business landscape is ever changing. There has been an increased emphasis on stakeholder values, particularly social and environmental concerns, and a new way to define business success. Most companies have long practiced some form of corporate social and environmental responsibility with the broad goal simply of contributing to the well being of the communities and society they affect and on which they rely on and depend on. The rise of new forms of organization will require redefining the fundamental building blocks of the business. So today's conversation would definitely focus on that, but specifically for travel and tourism sector, sustainable tourism was largely defined as the concept of doing no harm. New movement of regenerative tourism builds on that concept and explores opportunities for tourism to improve the destinations and leaving these destinations better than the way we found it. Thoughts like our obligation to the destination we visit are becoming mainstream. We're very glad to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. And as always, I'm here with my co host, Sam Eric. Sam.
Thank you, Abed. I think this discussion is so timely. I remember looking at sometime in the 80s where people talk about responsible tourism, and yes, the word sustainability came up. But at the end of the day, hotels and hotel owners and also the customers, there are very few customers who were really asking the probing questions, and they were more looking at the price point where you can get the cheapest holiday for your beach or so on. So we have come a long, long way, and I think it's also a generation shift of how people are viewing where they're going to go. Now, of course, for the last 10 years when the social media has risen, so hotels, businesses will get instant feedback if what they're doing well, and also will get also if they don't do what they promised. And so there is a more of a transparency now. So you cannot hide behind beautiful words and landing pages. You have to really show what you're good for. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion, and I think so timely more than ever. So let's bring all our guests here and let's get started.
Fabulous. So to introduce our panelists, first and foremost, Jake Haupert. Jake is co-founder and CEO of Transformational Travel Council, which was founded to drive the global transformational travel agenda through education, advocacy, action, and research, striving to maximize the potential of tourism. He's also the co-founder or strategic advisor for the conscious travel organizations, including Roam Beyond, Evergreen Escapes, and Explorer X. His calling is to positively transform how we live our lives, how we are with others, and how we relate to our planet. So thanks for being with us, Jake. We also have with us Portia Hart, who is founder of Blue Apple Beach House, a British Trinidadian, and having lived, studied, and worked in the UK, Japan, France, and Monaco. Portia today lives in Cartagena, Colombia, where she runs 2 boutique hotels and a beach club. She has also started a foundation there, creating jobs through recycling, and in her spare time volunteers as a mentor at the Conscious Travel Foundation, as well as being the standard bearer for regenerative travel. And last but not least, Jared Meyers, who is the chairman of Legacy Vacation Resorts. He's a value driven professional utilizing his time, resources, and abilities to improve social, environmental, and economic outcomes through certified B corporations and conscientious capitalism. He is co-founder and or investor in 4 successful B Corps, including Legacy Vacation Resorts, Salt Palm Development, Climate First Bank, and Done Good. He also co-founded the For Good movement, a nonprofit that oversees Florida for Good and bee tourism. Bee tourism, which I did not know until I started looking into it and until my conversation with Jared, serves as a global network of certified B Corporation travel and tourism companies, as well as other travel organizations taking collective action for the betterment of society and health of our planet. Jared, Jake, and Portia, thank you for your time and thanks for being with us.
Abid, may I just make a shout out here because we have quite a few viewers coming in, and we will encourage all the live viewers to join the conversation with their comments or questions, so then we can engage with each other on this platform. So make a comment or any question, and I will make sure I will post them here during the discussion and when you put the question to a particular guest of ours.
Well, we definitely have an all-star panel, so they're in the hot seat. Any questions that you want to ask, feel free to, because I personally look forward to learning from this conversation. So it'll be great to have your discussion points as well. So, Sam, if it's okay, we're going to have Jared lead us out in this conversation. Jared, thanks again for being with us. For our viewers and listeners, can you help us understand what in the world is B Corp and what are some of the key elements in this certification?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me here, by the way. So B Corp at first can seem kind of confusing, but in the simplest sense, it's a concept that business should do good, that business should be contributing to an inclusive, regenerative, and equitable system and not be an exploiter and extractor. And so the B Corp framework was established so that we could, one, get a legal commitment behind doing good, two, measure what it means to do good. So the same way that we all measure our profitability and we get our monthly financials, we want to put an equal focus on measuring our social and environmental impact in good ways or bad ways so that we can address them and in fact do better. So the B Corp framework basically is stakeholder orientation. And it allows us to measure our impact on all of our stakeholders, which includes our community, our environment, our workers, our customers, our supply chain, and then in fact our very governing documents behind how our businesses operate. And so we utilize this impact assessment for that measurement, which is used by about 4,000 B Corps worldwide and somewhere around 150,000 plus other businesses that use it just to measure their impact. To get the B Corp certification, we have to have a level of impact, which involves scoring over an 80 on that assessment, combined with the legal commitment for a positive impact, and then finally commit to a level of transparency where we're in fact kind of sharing a lot about our organization beyond what is very typical. We don't want to hide from the bad things we're doing. We want people to know what they are, and then we want to do better.
So, Jared, talk a little bit about your own journey. When did you decide to take this on? What prompted you to pursue this, and what was that like?
That's a good question. So from the resort standpoint, from Legacy Vacation Resorts, we became a B Corp in 2019. But my journey, in fact, started before that with Salt Palm Development as a real estate development company. And the reason that I considered the B Corp framework was I went through a period of time where I became fairly disillusioned with business overall. And that's all industries, but very much so even within our own industry. I found a lot of companies that spoke very well through their marketing materials about a few things that they were doing well and were very silent on the things they weren't doing well. Largely greenwashing, purpose washing, pretending that they were an amazing company and not sharing the whole picture. And we're at a state in our planet, in our world, and our societal structures that we really can't have that anymore. We had these 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we're trying to achieve by 2030, which will be an impossibility if business isn't a contributor in that direction. As you said earlier, government alone cannot solve these problems. So being very frustrated with business, I was at the point where either I was going to sell my businesses and back out entirely and go into some other endeavor, or I had to find a way for my businesses to truly be a force for good. But how can a business be a force for good if you don't have measurement systems to accomplish that? And so through some online research, I found B corporations. It took me a little while to get comfortable that they were in fact what they said they were. But when I did, I had made a firm commitment that my businesses had to become B Corps or else I'd sell them and get out of business. And then further, I wanted to help expand the concept so that others could do it, so that I could share what I learned and make it easier for them to come be part of this B Corp network.
So, Jared, running a business alone is a big undertaking. There are multiple different stakeholders that are tugging on you, not to mention the profitability side of it. What we have been taught in business schools, and that, up until recently, possibly the only measure for the success of a business. Talk a little bit about if I was to take this journey on to make my hotel company, whatever the case might be, what sorts of challenges can I anticipate? And is it possible to get through this cycle, or are people disheartened halfway through adding one more ball up in the air running a business?
It's a really good question. It isn't easy to become a B Corp. It is a rigorous process. You are committing to, again, publicly be transparent with your operations, which scares a lot of people. And you realize at the outset that you're failing and not doing well in a lot of areas. And so it is, again, it's a whole nother area you have to measure as a company that makes it difficult. But one of the good things right now of where we are as a society is there's a lot of benefits from that kind of pay off for those difficulties. So simply put, any business can become a B Corp if they really want to get there. I believe that you have to have buy-in at all levels within that organization, from high to low and in between, to believing that you have to have more of a purpose in business than just profits. Obviously, the planet needs that and our society needs that, but the business needs that if it's going to successfully become a B Corp. I think that's where most of them would fail, as they look at this as just an add-on and a clever way of marketing, and they realize it's so much more than that. You have to make meaningful, real change in your business, unless you happen to be one of them that was already acting this way and you just didn't know that the B Corp framework and certification existed. But largely right now, with the shifting of demographics and who our travelers are, who our employees are, what society is looking of business, there's an enormous amount of benefits to being a B Corp. So it's not just spending more money and making it harder on management. There's a lot of paybacks that make it well worthwhile.
So, Jared, if you were to identify, I don't know, let's talk about 5 low-hanging fruits that pretty much every organization can implement, and conversely, 5 things that are really very difficult. As you said, it's a rigorous process. It's not the matter of just adding a tagline to it. So tell us some of the easy things that just about anybody can do, and some of the more difficult things that are far more involved and might take a bit of time.
Absolutely. So I'll address maybe by stakeholder. So if we start on the environmental front, most businesses aren't measuring their carbon emissions. And that's really not that hard to do if you have a consultant help you do it or use some of these online tools. Many businesses don't even really know what that means, and it's really greenhouse gas emissions, not just carbon emissions. But we need to look and see what we're doing to our atmosphere and whether we're contributing to global warming and climate change or not. The first step is measurement. And so I'd be happy to recommend partners to anyone if they want to reach out to me afterwards on that. But I think that's a very easy first step. Then, the next step on that is deciding what you want to do about it, whether you want to actually get carbon offsets or whether you want to start reducing your energy use as a company. And some of those elements are difficult, but some are not. Some are as simple as changing out light bulbs to LED bulbs, programmable thermostats, getting better insulation in your properties. Those aren't too difficult. Things that are difficult on the environmental front are, how do you truly reduce all of your energy use? Now, one way is to get renewable energy sources, but other ways are to really put systems in place that will reduce the actual usage. And that takes more of a management approach. But all these examples I'm giving right here contribute to ROIs and financial payback. So it's not just there for the environment. From an employee standpoint, it's doing more programs to help your employees be engaged and feel engaged, making sure that they are part of the decisioning process so that they have buy-in. That just is good management, I think, at any level, whether you're a B Corp or not. So you want inclusiveness with your employees. One of the harder things with your employees might be depending on where your pay scales are. So two components that get measured in the B Corp assessment would be one, do you pay a living wage? And while I think when anyone learns what a living wage is, they feel that absolutely they should be doing it, they realize that it's expensive if you haven't been paying that. And that may be a financial concern. Another are like pay rate ratios, like what is the most expensive or the CEO making a business compared to the lowest paid employee. And if that ratio is very large, none of these things knock you out from being able to be a B Corp, but they do what they call positive scoring. So you gain points when you do good behaviors. When you're not doing the good behaviors, you basically get 0 points. So if you want to become a B Corp, you have to have several good things that you're doing. But that ratio, as an example, can be difficult for some if you have a large pay disparity. So it rewards those that have a smaller ratio between highest and lowest paid. From a community standpoint, if you have good community programs and you're already donating money to a certain degree, that's measured as a percentage of revenue. So you might already be doing a good job. If you're not, then there is a financial outflow that would govern that. But it's not just also charitable contributions; it's volunteer hours. So are we encouraging our employees to volunteer, within our communities? I think it really varies based on the business, which ones of these are hard and which ones are easy, depending on what they are, already doing. And then maybe even lastly, from a kind of a governance standpoint, you do need to make a legal change. And so depending on the company, it will require an investor vote. And that can be difficult depending on, again, how many investors you have and how values aligned they are with you. In my business, since I'm the owner with my wife, it wasn't too difficult for us to make that legal commitment. It was just a simple amendment that took a minute to sign. So I guess I'll stop there.
Well, congratulations. I'm glad that you were able to convert. And since you have been actively involved in it, hopefully there are other organizations that can learn from you. Jared, let me turn it over to Sam at this particular point. I'll be right back with you. Sam.
Thank you. I was wondering that nowadays the talent that have decided to leave the industry and they're doing something else. How will B Corps are able to attract the talent who seeks a meaningful career for themselves? What are the sort of the key points that you could tell the 18, 19, 20-year-old talent that is want to do something with their life, and how should they go about it? Because this is always the wondering: is it really worthwhile for me and at the beginning of my career and to join such a company?
So I think why B Corp is so appealing to our younger generations is because they actually do care about these social and environmental causes. And when they see that the business stands for something greater than just making money, they feel very values aligned with those businesses. Like, we care about what they think about, and we actually elevate their voice within our business and kind of work hand in hand towards a much larger goal. I think anyone who has a successful business, even if it's not a B Corp, knows if you can align your employees' beliefs and value systems with what the company stands for, they will give you everything that they have. And if you can't do that, right, there's a statistic out there that about 2/3 of employees are completely engaged at the average business. I mean, that's an enormous number. And that's, I mean, how I don't even know how businesses stay in business when you have that many disengaged employees. So it's up to us to find ways to engage employees, to attract employees. And what we speak about and what we stand for authentically is an attractant, I think, to the younger generation.
Excellent. And somebody may ask me, isn't the self-monitoring enough? You're placing a lot of emphasis on have to be certified. I mean, I'm a bright guy. I've gone through colleges and I run my own business and I can do it very well. So why should I sign up for things? I think I'm quite confident to do self-monitoring. What would you answer such a person who asks you that question?
I would encourage people to self-monitor also. So the impact assessment we use as a B Corp is available to everyone. It's free and confidential, and you can self-monitor. The main reason why a certification has value is that the trust in our society is at like all-time low levels. And so if you really want people to trust what you're having to say, you need third-party verification, whether that's a certification, an audit. You know, there's a variety of ways that you could describe that. But rightfully so, businesses have taken advantage of our trust. And businesses and governments and other institutions lack the credibility that they once had. And the way to provide that is to have a third-party stamp that says, yep, this was audited or verified, that they're doing what they say they're saying.
Yeah, very good. My final question before I hand over back to Abid is that what have you noticed the willingness of consumers to pay more for a sustainable consumer brand or a place to stay?
I have noticed that, and that obviously isn't all consumers, and some of that is based on the generational shift, as I had spoken about. It's really where within one's value system they're placing sustainability or the stakeholder orientation. But those that do value sustainability and stakeholder orientation, I think the statistics out there are showing that just continues to become more of an important value system. They are paying more because they know that when they give us their money, we're spending it in the right direction, right? It could be the exact opposite. They could be giving it to a business engaged in horrible behaviors and practices, but it might be the lowest cost operator, and you're basically paying for the type of world that you want to create. If you want a regenerative world, you go to a resort like ours. If you don't really care about how those funds are going to be used, you go to the lowest cost provider.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to then encourage all the live viewers who have joined us to write down some questions. We'll ask Jared when the time is right. But now over back to Abid.
Thank you, Sam. Jared, talk a bit about some of the changes relative to our social responsibility that you might have seen, particularly as a result of the pandemic, and whether they would be long-lasting.
I mean, one of the more significant ones is our industry as a whole was very quick to let employees go. And so there's a lot of conversations of, well, how hard it is to hire employees, and they blame government stimulus and other reasons for that. But the reality is that we didn't show our employees that we cared for them enough. We showed them that they were a cost in our operation that could be reduced and eliminated. And so if you look at the businesses that treated their employees with respect and dignity, those are doing pretty well right now. I mean, we have the same headcount now as we did at the beginning of the pandemic. And that's enormous. So when businesses were scrambling to try to reopen their doors and they couldn't find anyone, we already had employees so that we could open our doors. And our employees were happy. And we had the highest satisfaction levels we've ever had as a company at the end of this pandemic. And they voted us a top workplace. But that's largely because we didn't look at them as a cost-cutting mechanism. We looked at them as integral into our operation. So that, I mean, that's just one social component. Community is another one. We know that the community was struggling. And so that's, in fact, really how Beat Tourism got launched, was we were trying to share our best practices out there with other B Corps and others who thought and felt like we did, so that we could help them survive this, whether that was through government stimulus, whether that was through better practices. We wanted that community aspect, which is essential I think in all areas of success.
Well, terrific. Jared, really appreciate your insights. Please stay with us. We'll have you back in a moment. But at this particular point, I'd like to bring up Portia Hart, who is with Blue Apple Beach. Portia, thanks for your time and joining us.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Portia, somebody who has lived all around the world, first of all, your story about getting into hospitality, what were you thinking?
I clearly wasn't thinking hard enough, otherwise I might have made a different decision. No, it's interesting how you guys opened the session. I was born in the early 80s, and I think mine might be the last generation that was really born into this world that was focused almost entirely on money, and success being something that you define by what's in your bank account. And so for me, when I graduated from university, it was pre-financial crisis. We were the last year, and everyone that I graduated with, was going into the city, or they were going off to be lawyers. I ended up in Monaco working for a yacht brokerage firm, and it was just so. I mean, I guess they were the last hurrah. These years of money and the bottom line being very singular. And after nearly 10 years working in yachting and working in the south of France, living in Monaco, living an extremely privileged life, I kind of had this feeling, and I think, we've touched on it, that perhaps millennials and below, we are looking for a life that's maybe values aligned. I had a slight feeling of, I don't want to say emptiness, but that there might be more to life. And plus I was, working with all these people who were millionaires and billionaires and had everything in the world, and they were still having the same problems that I could see other people having, fighting with their wives, and their kids weren't talking to them. And, they were having issues like hiding a mistress on one yacht while their family was on another. And so I took a decision to leave the south of France, leave Europe, and head out into the developing world, and perhaps just open my eyes and see something a bit different. And I arrived in Colombia. I didn't speak any Spanish at the time, but I was really struck by how this is a country that has lived a very challenging, a very difficult, and a very painful last half century. And not only have people suffered within the country, the country's international reputation has taken a real beating. And yet here were all these people that I was meeting on a day-to-day basis, just so enthusiastic and positive and optimistic for the future. And that was such a stark contrast to my experience living in France and the UK, these kind of first world developed nations where we love to complain about everything that doesn't work instead of celebrating the things that do. And I saw, and I don't want to be reductive, but I saw, a level of general happiness that I hadn't seen for a long time. So I decided to stay here. And although you can take the girl out of the south of France, there was a little bit of the south of France left in me. And I kind of
Did we lose Portia?
Yes, I think she's. I hope she comes back in a moment.
Okay, we'll give a couple of seconds and see if she reconnects. If not, we can bring Jared up. Jake up and continue with the conversation.
Yes.
Just give her a minute, and we'll take it from there. Well, it seems like it's going to take a bit of time, so let's bring Jake up if it's okay, Sam, and then we can continue to work through Portia as she reconnects. Well, Jake, thanks for jumping in. Is Jake frozen as well?
Maybe he's taking a nap. I think he's frozen.
I think Jake is frozen as well. So stay on Portia. Let me try to connect with her.
I think she's dialing in again, perhaps.
All right. Boy, technology is a wonderful thing as long as it works.
Well, we are now having a live stream from around the world. So all these things are possible. And
so whoever connects, we can continue to carry out the conversation. If Jake is there, we can pick him up. If Portia comes back, entirely your call. It is really unfortunate that we lost Portia. I've absolutely loved her story as to her move to Colombia and how she got into hospitality, particularly talk about moving from possibly the most opulent, privileged place to the other end of the spectrum. Portia has just lost power, so she might not be able to connect. This is because of the weather that they were experiencing. So let's see if we can bring Jake. I think Jake is frozen as well.
yeah, so
Let's well, we can continue our
we can
conversation
call
with
Jared.
Jared.
Let's get
Yes,
Jared
yes,
back.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Jared, you're on.
Jared, thanks for jumping back in. Technology, as good as it is, it does present some challenges. You had talked about businesses looking at other things as opposed to just the profits. Now, business schools don't teach you. I can actually count on my fingertips if I went through, looked at the schools that might have courses about social responsibility in business. Wall Street hasn't talked about it, and they are just beginning. What motivates companies to take this on?
I think one of the largest, and it probably depends on the size of the organization and how they view their place in the world, and how if they really want to be leaders. But any company that wants to be a leader recognizes that they are a cog or a component in a much larger system. And you can contribute to that system towards positive system change, or you can allow the old system to continue moving forward. I think the traditional business mechanism of shareholders first and profits first will create all the same results that produce the world that we have today. And so a lot of the problems that we're fighting, we can't solve even if you have a few good businesses here and there. We need systemic change, and to create systemic change, we do need large-scale businesses acting, and we need small and medium businesses collectively acting towards that positive change. And so it's really important that these businesses learn how they can measure that positive or negative impact they're having, and then take steps into the right direction to address those. And because of the unique moment, I think that will also contribute to profitability. I don't know if I'm frozen right now, but I'll keep on talking. So
No, you good.
Right
You
now,
good.
okay. So right now, businesses that are addressing these social problems are being rewarded by customers and by employees, and even in situations like lower cost capital. So I can attest to that even with our own business. The B Corp community, I'm part of a bank called Climate First Bank, which is also a certified B Corp, and they provide us lower cost loans for values aligned loans. So loans that are being, if we do a construction project to LEED certification standards or Energy Star certification, if we incorporate more renewable energy through solar panels, they're working on electrified transportation and water management. And so there are a variety of opportunities and ways that businesses can cut costs and get ROIs, for these efforts. So it's not just simply do it because it's the right thing. I might be motivated for that reason, but everyone does not be motivated for that reason. But they should be looking at, returns on investment and how do their actions contribute to a better or a worse system, which are going to create future problems for them in their industry. And a really good example of this, I think, is what we have seen during COVID and the pandemic. There's so much conversation now about resilience and the lack of resilience that our industry and even our economy had. Well, that's not entirely true if you look at sectors of it or components of it. So if you look at the B Corp community as a whole, they actually did pretty well. I think more than half of the B Corps, and this statistic may be a little bit off, grew revenue during the pandemic, which is unheard of. I mean, right? Grew revenue, people aren't talking about that. But the stakeholder mindset contributes to resilience. And so it's kind of future-proofing your business for these problems, which inevitably are going to happen again to some degree.
Fair enough. I think Portia is back online, so thanks for jumping in, Jared. We'll have you back. So let's bring Portia. Portia, thank you. We understand you were fighting the Wi-Fi gremlins and you won, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the timing couldn't have been better, having just said that I was in the developing world.
Well, look, your entire story of how you ended up in the two ends of the spectrum, from Monaco, which is possibly the height of opulence and privileged life, to the other end of the spectrum. Thank you for sharing that. Talk a little bit about your own journey and some of the things that you have had to go through, because as we all know, we have always thought that these kinds of efforts are only for the larger organizations. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I mean, when I first started, I opened my first beach club, and we had 6 bedrooms. And somebody said to me, "Oh, are you going to be an eco hotel?" And I kind of laughed and was like, "No way." I mean, firstly, most eco hotels are just people that can't be bothered to install air conditioning. And secondly, if we were going to do it properly, there's just no way that we could afford to. And I had this very strong sensation, and I don't know where it came from, but that doing business the right way, caring about climate, um, uh, reducing your carbon footprint, installing installation, running off renewables, was extremely expensive. And I was starting a business with my own savings. We didn't have institutional investors. There was no big backer. There were 3 of us putting our hands in our pockets and making it up as we went along. And then, and it's so interesting listening to what Jared said, because as we're 5 years old now, every year, every time we came up against a problem, essentially the problem was solvable if we just made the right decision. So, one of the problems that we had was that there's no municipal trash collection on the island. And so we were paying someone to come and collect our rubbish, and they were just putting our rubbish in our next door neighbor's garden. We found out the hard way when our next door neighbor showed up, raving with rage, understandably. And so we were, left with a decision, which was trash, getting rid of it is going to be complicated. We have to reduce the amount of rubbish we produce. And what we do produce, we have to work out if we can recycle it. And what we can't recycle, which ended up being compost and glass waste, because they have very low value as waste products, we're going to try and do that ourselves. And, out of that, we've spun into a business which now either diverts or recycles 75% of its waste, so it's not ending up in landfill. And then glass and organic waste, which would be going to landfill because there's no solution for that here in Cartagena, we're able to do ourselves. And we do that via a nonprofit, which we set up because there are actually so many other businesses with the same issue that we made it independent from Blue Apple. And that nonprofit has produced 5 full-time jobs. So we have solved a problem that we had. We are having a positive environmental impact, or at least reducing our negative environmental impact, and we're saving money. And I just can't echo strongly enough Jared's words that when you really do it properly, and I think it is a lot easier for small businesses, doing business the right way can actually have a positive impact on your bottom line financially, as well as obviously having less of a negative impact on environmental and social impact. And we are in the process of certifying for B Corp. So, Jared, you're preaching to the choir.
Well, terrific, Portia. Congratulations on all this. Look, in some ways, smaller companies, possibly in developing economies, it might be a little bit easier. A lot of the mature economies are far more litigious. There are lots of hurdles that you have to jump across to do any of these things, even though people might want to embrace these, but sometimes the environment might not allow it. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, as a Brit, I can tell you that we are a lot less litigious and a lot less bureaucratic than almost any other country I've lived in. And Colombia is certainly not administratively an easy country to live in, and certainly not to work in. And I would say I've just finished reading The New Climate War by Michael Mann, and I'm a total convert on it. And he talks a lot about giving up on things before even trying them, and that there is sometimes a sense of doomism when we want to approach something and we say, a bit like I did when I opened my business, well, I'm sure it's just going to be really expensive and difficult. And often we do that without investigating. And when we make the first small step, we realize that if you approach any issue in a small and bite-sized way, it's not as hard as it might be if you look at the whole thing. And I think where small businesses and medium-sized businesses are really well placed to kind of attack problems of climate change, environmental impact, and social equality is that we're run by entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs by their very nature are used to overcoming difficult hurdles and attacking problems as and when they pop up. So I would say to anyone who's kind of looking at it saying, maybe, but it's too hard, you've already done something much harder. If you've started a company, if your company is still solvent, especially if you're in travel and you're coming out of COVID, and if you have coped with the hurdles that have come your way, then you can cope with this hurdle as well. And there are other ways of running a business that does things the right way. It doesn't have to be B Corp. I think find one that suits you and just slowly attack it day by day.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Portia, let me hand it over to Sam here, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam.
Thank you. Your story is fascinating, and I'm just intrigued of hearing what you have gone through and understanding the challenges and so on. How coming into a new country, a new location, what were your steps in order to develop trust in the people you were working with, or the community for that matter? Because it's natural when there's a newcomer, they will kind of look with a suspicion, what is this person doing? What were the things that you did in order to overcome maybe perhaps some resistance, if there were any?
Everything went exactly as I wasn't expecting it. So in my first business, I actually partnered with a Colombian because at that point I didn't speak Spanish. My question would have been exactly what you've just said to me. How am I going to integrate myself with this community? Best do it with someone from the community. And within about 3 months, I was translating for her to speak to our employees. And I was doing that because although they shared a nationality and they shared a language, she coming from the educated and higher socioeconomic class than our employees, there was an enormous class difference. And that was stopping them from understanding each other. So although I didn't have the linguistic capability to connect with my team, what I did have was the values that I've been taught by growing up in the society that I grew up in, where when I was an employee, when I was a graduate student, when I was an intern, I was always treated respectfully by my boss. I was always paid a living wage. I was always taken care of. And that I kind of brought with me to Cartagena. And very surprisingly, that wasn't a common way of running a business. And so I actually gained trust from my team much faster than I would have expected. And I ended up learning Spanish really from them, because I suddenly lost my crutch of being able to go through my business partner. And that's quite a common story here in Cartagena. Certainly, there are a lot of businesses that are run by either Colombians who've spent a lot of time overseas, or foreigners who've come here and been adopted, and who are not actually being extractive, but who are bringing, I think, certain values that we've been taught in our business society to perhaps something that has traditionally been a little bit more old-fashioned. And then in terms of community, so the village literally next door to Blue Apple, about in our second year of operation or our third year of operation, we started a formal process of prior consent with the local community, and that meant, and that's been a process that's gone on until actually this August we completed, and that's something that's governed by the United Nations, and it takes you through with leaders from the community and with members of the community the impacts that your business has, and how those can either be mitigated, reduced, or compensated. So I've done it both informally and formally, learned a lot through both, and I think both are necessary. I would have never signed up to do a kind of formal process of prior consent when I got into this, but I learned a lot about the assumptions we can sometimes make when we come from outside, about what a community wants. You know, this automatic assumption that everybody wants more money and everybody wants a passport and everybody wants to travel. And I've learned that everybody wants different things. And actually, if you ask, you might get an answer. But I've also then learned that sometimes we don't know what we want. And it's only when we are presented with an opportunity that we never dreamt that we could have, that we think, actually, I'd like to seize that opportunity. So there's no right answer, I don't think, apart from ask questions, listen to answers, and offer opportunities rather than telling people what's good for them.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was going to ask you what advice would you give to somebody who wants to start a business, but I think you have already answered that. So that's fantastic. How about grooming new talent for your organization? You said you have two. So how do you go about that, especially in the kind of environment you are in?
It's something that I've been grappling with recently more than ever, because I also in my spare time work for a company called Regenerative Travel, and that's a collection of small properties around the world that are independently owned and are doing their best to not only be sustainable but actually regenerate the ecosystems and the communities where they're based. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is how there is a prevalence, certainly in bigger chain hotels, but even in small hotels, that the top of the management structure is always a foreigner. And that's often because an owner has thrown up their hands, walked away from their country in despair, settled in a new part of the world, and is now sort of set on showing what they've discovered to travelers from overseas. And it's also, I think, because sometimes it's difficult to find local talent that has, and I'm very quick to say here, not because local talent isn't talented, but often talent that has experience working with international clientele. And in my properties, actually, my three general managers are all foreigners. I have one Hungarian, one Venezuelan, and one Frenchman. And so I'm very aware of the fact that I'm preaching, on the one hand, you know, local talent and local opportunity and not kind of parachuting foreigners in. And on the other hand, here I am with a leadership team that's all born overseas. What I would say is underneath my general managers, we have a team of trainee managers who are all from Cartagena. And I hope very much that in our next 5 years, we will see our general managers move on perhaps to start their own businesses or to go on to run bigger and better things than my businesses, and for them to be replaced by people from Cartagena. And the second thing I would say is that, you know, there's a difference between someone who's looking to do a 2-year contract before they go to their next country and their next country and their next country, and somebody who has moved to a city and has perhaps married someone there and has children there and is settled there. You know, my mother is an immigrant and she's been in her community in England for 45 years. And I think now if she started a business, hopefully they would say it was a locally owned business. So I think, again, you know, there are no hard and fast rules, but I am slightly suspicious of properties that are maybe 25 years old, where the general manager is still a foreigner.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Portia. And let me hand over back to Abid.
Portia, talk a little bit about diversity in our industry. Why is it so important? You talked about developing local talent with the nationals from the area, and certainly that'll contribute a great deal to the societal changes that will be brought about. And we all need to work on conscientiously developing the local talent, but generally speaking, over a broad spectrum. Talk a bit about the diversity and why is it so important?
Well, I mean, specifically for travel, we literally sell diversity. So the reason that we go overseas and we go to different countries, apart from, okay, needing some time off work, some sunshine, and to escape our evil boss, I don't know, but a lot of travel is based around seeing something new, seeing people that live differently from you, seeing different architectures, eating different foods, seeing different ecosystems, experiencing different nature. We sell and we live from diversity. And one of the most frustrating things to see in our industry is that the people that own it and run it are actually all quite homogenous. And this is not the first panel that I've sat on where I'm the only girl. And it's not the first panel where I've sat on where, you know, all of us are of a certain age or above. and we're all able-bodied, we're all speaking in English. I know English isn't our first language for everyone, and that's a good sign. We see in travel still, especially in hotel ownership, that I think I was given the statistic the other day that I have not fact-checked, but that 85% of CEOs in travel are white and male. And what happens if you have an industry that is controlled by one specific group, even if that group has the best of intentions, is that accidentally and without meaning to, you can actually ignore the wants and the needs of other groups. And I'll give an example by throwing myself under the bus. I'm straight, and although our hotels are completely gay friendly, and actually we're very popular with the LGBTQ community, I was called out the other day by a gay couple who said to me, two men, you know, it's really annoying that the robes in the rooms are a large and a small, because everywhere we travel, one of us has to wear the small robe. And it was my ignorance and lack of experience personally that led me to just do what everyone else does, which is, you know, you put one big and one small because that's what the generic couple looks like to me. Now, if I were in a same-sex couple, I probably wouldn't have done that because I wouldn't have lived in a world where my relationship was always kind of size denominated. So I think, and I use that example because I don't want to kind of rain down brimstone on white men, but to make it clear that without knowing, you can sometimes be ignoring a community, and that community can actually represent revenue to you. So again, diversity can have a really positive impact on your bottom line, as well as making the world a nicer place.
Well, Portia, that's a fabulous example, and one, honestly, I must confess, I wouldn't have thought of until you brought it up, and now it's going to be embedded because typically when you do set the hotels up, and I'm not a small guy, so I would always put in one big robe, one small robe, one big set of slippers, one small slippers, and that's how the rooms were set up. But excellent point. It's been registered, so thank you for bringing that up. One last question before we bring our next guest up, Portia. How can the sector unite behind this cause to attend to the social environment? There is lots being done, but I must confess, most of the time, the environmental issues are being talked about. Maybe social issues are still on a back burner. Any thoughts?
I think we've talked a lot about, and we've worked a lot in environmental because, of course, you know, there's no, I think, awkwardness or discomfort in saying, you know, we need to maintain biodiversity or regenerate biodiversity. I think conversations around social inequality, discrimination, diversity, and inclusion can feel very uncomfortable. And certainly for those of us that are sitting in positions of privilege, there is a fear, I think, of cancel culture. And for those of us who are sitting in positions where we don't hold power, there is either a sense of despair or I'm never going to make it, so what's the point? Or even not knowing that something is available to you. So I was on a call the other day and there was a young BIPOC girl from the UK, and she wrote to me afterwards, like, I'm so happy to have seen someone that looked like me in a position of ownership and power in the industry, and it's made me realize that I can get there. And I think the way that we can address the issue is by having very, very open conversations, having lots of compassion, asking questions from a well-meaning point of view, and if a question is difficult to answer, taking the time and the patience to understand why someone is asking you that question. And just to keep on talking about it. And I've had a lot of very, very meaningful and constructive, but sometimes difficult conversations over the past year, especially since the Black Lives Matter movement happened, about equality and about how hotels can do more. You know, I've spoken to members of Regenerative Travel about whether or not they're representing ethnic diversity, ability diversity in their Instagrams, on their websites, or are they traditionally choosing models that all look a certain way? You know, and people's instant reaction is to think like, but I'm not racist, or I'm not discriminatory, or you know, people in wheelchairs are really welcome in my property. And it's like, don't worry. We're not saying that you are, but ask yourself, could I perhaps make my marketing more open? And could I make my marketing more inclusive and kinder? and make people feel like they're more welcome without having to come to me and ask.
Well, in many ways, though, technology and social media, I think, has pigeonholed us more now than we ever were, because the feed that comes to us is the feed that we possibly might have stumbled upon at one point or another. I know that's a big, 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 big debate that will continue to go on. And the pendulum also might have swung towards the cancel culture. As a matter of fact, just this morning, I was listening to a conversation where the differing point of views, whether you're for or against, are not really welcomed in the group that I might belong to. And how do we overcome that? Because I might not even know how to have this conversation. So how do I get myself comfortable enough? And how do we overcome that? I had told you that was the last question, but this will be the last question.
It's something that I've spoken a lot about with my friends and family, because you're right, there is a real fear of being cancelled, and especially for people who are high profile in their industry. And so the tendency is to, well, say nothing and ask nothing in case I ask the wrong thing or I say the wrong thing, and then then that's it. And what I do when I have a question is I ask somebody who I have a good relationship with, and who I trust, and I say to them before, look, I've got this question, and I think it might be quite stupid, or it might be offensive, but I'd really like to know your opinion. And I've had a lot of these conversations with my LGBTQ clients and with my LGBTQ staff, as we as a business have tried to make ourselves more open and more appealing to that community. And I have encouraged my friends to have that conversation with me when it comes to color, because that, of course, has been a very contentious thing over the last 12 months. And I think there is this big thing and this school of thought that you can't put the solutions on the shoulders of the people who have suffered. And that is absolutely right. You can't say, well, I'm in a position of privilege and now you have to help me solve the problem. But I think you can go to allies in your own peer group, in your own family, in your own social network or your professional network, and very quietly and kindly say, I'd like to be better, and I'm not obliging you to give me the answer, but if you are able to point me in the right direction, I would really appreciate it. And I certainly am never hostile to questions about race, about diversity, about how businesses can be more diverse or racially inclusive. And my friends in the queer community have been equally kind and compassionate with me. So
Well,
find the right
fabulous.
people.
Thank you so much for that, Portia. We'll have to have another conversation on diversity, because that in itself is a very, very important topic that we all need to learn about. But please stay with us. We'll have you back. But at this point, let's bring Jake Haupert up. Jake, thank you for joining us. I'm glad that you have won that battle with the Wi-Fi as well. There appears to be a bit of latency, but we'll continue to go through it. Talk a little bit about what is the consistent thread amongst the members of Transformational Travel Council. Why would anybody want to join this council? Jake, I think you.
Good question, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I want to acknowledge Jared and Portia for their wonderful presentations. A common thread within our global community would probably just be this sense that we can do and be better, as an industry, and better support and understand, how we can build relationships, between travelers and visitors and residents and travelers and connections with others and connections with nature and the universe. And I feel like the Transformational Travel Councils, and that community, has dedicated itself to awakening travel's potential for good. And I think that unifying force of just trying to be a little bit better, I think, is what bonds us and keeps us motivated and challenge us to ask deeper questions and maybe even more so, listen more intently. I think that with the pandemic, and the impact that that's had on the industry, it's given us a really unique opportunity to go within, and identify flaws in our systems. and really start to evaluate, how do we want to live, or how are we living now, and how do we want to live? And travel's just been such a great catalyst for change and impact in our lives. And so,
Fair enough.
my colleagues, to go back to your question, really care about that ability for travel to be good.
So, Jake, if you were to take a poll of the members, what do you think your membership is dealing with? What kind of challenges are they up against today, particularly when it relates to the social responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the cusp of great change and great opportunity. And our entire society and industry is being faced with this, this unknown and this uncertainty, and having to evolve. And I think we're very much in this liminal state right now, as a space. We've been forced to sort of reevaluate who we are and what are our values. What do we care about? And with the social and environmental crisis that we're all experiencing, it's giving us a real chance, to go within and ask ourselves hard questions, and begin to heal, us as individuals, as change really does come from the inside out, and start to align around new behaviors and new values that are catalytic to personal fulfillment and happiness and peace, justice, and stewardship.
Jake, from a destination lens, I know you're working with a few destinations to apply the transformative principles there and make sure that the destinations are being looked after. Tell us what some of those practices are. Tell us what hurdles there might be for a destination to adopt this principle.
Yeah. Just to give a little bit of background on that, the TTC rigorously develops courses and trainings and workshops for the travel trade and for travelers. Specifically, we work with destinations in a way that it helps and guides them through transformational change, and simultaneously introduces transformational travel practices, so you can learn to create the conditions for travelers to have deeper and more meaningful experiences, but then also introducing regenerative tourism principles that start to help a destination come together under shared values, and create a shared vision, that ultimately allows for a symbiotic or more cooperative way of engaging and behaving as a community and as a destination, and that ultimately leading towards toward a thrivability that I think a lot of destinations are craving or soon will. And with these destinations and with communities, we Portia talked a little about having these conversations and asking questions, and a lot of what our destinations are built on is coming from the top down, and where we would really like to see change and transformation is start to listen to the communities, and the residents. Who are they? What do they want? Where do they see the tourism go, and how do they want to engage with visitors? And really, that being the guiding voice and the guiding light, for the industry. But that requires us to really reshape our values, as an industry, and open up and create space for this sort of dialogue. It's very much a time of unlearning, if you will, and going within and getting a sense for what makes us feel alive, what brings life to our homes and our communities, and what brings life to the places that we visit, and try to create a coherence there, a symbiosis that is really going to be catalytic to well-being for all. We've got a long way to go, but the TTC's in that destination space in that way.
Well, look, a couple of destinations that come to mind, and to be honest, I have been involved in a few of the destinations myself where over tourism was really an issue and it was being actively talked about. But the bureaucrats dealing with the destinations and or businesses operating in the destinations, we were all addicted to the volumes coming through, whether it was good for long term or not. The only other way that some of the destinations have done this well, and the destination of Bhutan comes to mind, where, to Portia's point, they don't even measure GDP, they measure gross happiness product. But it is Bhutan's levying some of the fees. Could that become an elitist mentality because the only people that can visit that destination are people that are well off? It's not easy to get to, plus the fees put into it. It's not for the faint of heart. When I was in Hawaii, and most recently I read an article about how Hawaii is trying to change, bringing people in, tapping the traveler that truly cares about the environment and believes in the Hawaiian values that are being cherished today. What are your thoughts?
That's a big question. I would say that places like Bhutan and others that are bringing their focus to um, I guess to happiness or joy or fulfillment, to well-being. I think they're certainly on the right track, as long as they're looking at it from a holistic perspective, and honoring all voices in all communities. And at the same time, the stuff that I hear around destinations only inviting, a specific demographic or individuals with means to their destinations in a way to combat tourism feels, in all honesty, rather disturbing. I don't see that as a solution at all. I think travel is too important and too powerful, in terms of breaking down walls within us and between us. And so I think that there's a significant some significant work that has to be done around shifting our values and the value propositions that we have, and that happens on the destination and the community level, and listening to the voices of the communities and the individual visitors or the residents that are most impacted, that are connected to the space and the place and to nature, inviting them, but at the same time, shifting the value proposition in the market, with travelers, and we're seeing this shift, where people are, awakening to wanting, to get more meaning out of their travel, to have deeper experiences, and build relationships that are genuine and more sticky and live with us. That's at the core of why we travel. So I think that the travelers need to understand that going to some of these places that are over touristed, it's not going to give them the same sort of value or the same sort of personal fulfillment as getting into some of the places that are more real, that are more genuine, that are more connected to the place, and doing so in a respectful way. That's where we have those encounters that I think are so magical and really unleash the power of travel.
That sounds fabulous, Jake. I guess the question remains, and I'll come back to you. I'm going to hand it over to Sam here, but question remains the big how. These principles, everybody might understand the value in it, but when I try to implement them, I don't even know where to begin. So we'll come back to that. Let me turn it over to Sam here.
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in you said you are doing some workshops for travelers. Is that like a traveler education?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for somebody who has been traveling, going to sort of the mainstream places on holidays and so on, and then they, of course, there's a call that they want to learn something, maybe have an experience that they have never experienced before, want to learn something new. What would you tell them, and what will you tell them in your workshops? So how to approach a destination that they maybe never thought of going to?
Yeah. So one of the core components of what we provide is centered around getting travelers to actively engage their experience, not be passive. And I think that's a significant shift in itself. So that's adopting a growth mindset and looking at it in terms of stages. So it's not just looking at travel as a specific product or a source of entertainment, or even an opportunity just to search for transformation. It is a process, and travelers can develop and nurture a practice that is more meaningful for them. Allows them to be more mindful of how they travel, which has a positive impact on the places they go, and also their communities when they return home. With those stages include listening to that call to adventure, and asking, why am I feeling like I'd like to hit the road, and being introspective around that, and then getting into some sort of intention setting process. Where am I now, and where do I want to be? How do I want to get there, and how can I use travel as an opportunity to go within and not just seek answers, but seek bigger questions. And then there's a certain amount of presencing that has to happen. It's really important that when you're traveling, you let go of expectations, you surrender to the experience a little bit. And be really present to the opportunities to engage and meet new people, and connect to new places. And then there's reflection, and a meaning-making process, that ultimately illuminates opportunities to bring those experiences back home where you can transform.
Yeah, but it also sets quite a high expectation on the location or the resort or the destination where the travelers is going. What are you telling them, first of all, to pay attention to in the destinations?
You said expectations. I think that travel is, unfortunately, when we call it the 4 or 5 E's, it's very much been shifted away from this opportunity to stretch, learn, and grow, into something that is filled, or that is about entertainment and entitlement, expectation and exploitation, and ultimately about ego. And so I think when you do embark on a journey, if you're a transformational travel, especially if that's something that you are that you care about facilitating with your travelers, I think you encourage them to let go of the expectation, and then help them become more informed. Right. The ultimate goal in my mind as a travel designer would be to help them develop an informed and intentional travel practice, so they can be more mindful, so they can be more respectful. All of which to say is allows for more meaning to come to the surface.
All right. Well, thank you. These are very large questions, large things. So, but let me hand over to Abid, and maybe we can get the focus on some certain things that you still want to probe in this discussion.
Yes, Sam, let's bring everybody back together. One more question for Jake, if I may ask. Jake, what's different in our current environment? What's the future for our destinations?
I think our destinations have a very unique, once in a lifetime opportunity to look within and start to reimagine how they engage their communities, and their residents and their environment, and really bring those values and the essence of that destination to the surface in a way that attracts a new type of traveler that really appreciates those values and some of that inside out approach. And I think that I think the most important and critical thing that's happening in our industry right now, and to just talk a little bit about your question, is like, how do we do it? I think that we're often so eager to seek out solutions, and I think that it's more about like creating space for self-inquiry and bringing new questions to the table, going into the unexamined and the unconscious, within us as individuals, but also as destinations. I think it was Einstein that said, you can't solve problems with the same consciousness that created it. And so we're in this time and space now that we are open up to new consciousness. And so with that and asking more questions, we're going to identify some of these solutions to hopefully course correct and fix some of these flaws in our system.
But Jake, human beings of what we are, I never create any problems. It's the other guy that creates the problems. I'm always focused on solving these. But Portia, a question for you. Are there too many organizations that are trying to do the same thing? And as a result, is the voice being diluted? We have Center for Responsible Tourism, Destination Stewardship Center, Sustainable Travel International, Tourism Cares, and some of the ones that we've already talked about. Is that a lot where we cannot stay focused? Your thoughts?
I don't think so. I look at it the way I look at food. I never feel like there are too many cuisines in the world, and there certainly aren't too many restaurants for me to go and try and eat at in Cartagena. Um, each one in its own way will be different, and each one will resonate differently with a different business. So whereas Crest might not work for me, and regenerative travel does, for Jared it might be different. I think the more of these organizations there are and the more crowded that marketplace becomes, what we're saying is that capitalism, that the market thinks that there is a need for responsible business administration in our industry. And I think that's only a good thing. Will they all survive? Who knows? But them all being there and making noise says to me, let's wake up and pay attention.
Fair enough. Jared, question for you. How can we build the resilience by practicing some of the social initiatives? I know this pandemic was a bit of a wake-up call on multiple fronts, but can these principles be put into place to help us build resilience in travel and tourism?
They can be, and so I touched on this a little bit before. I truly believe if you have a stakeholder framework, you're a more resilient business. And there's numbers that support that across the B Corp community. And so if we're very narrowly focused on just profit, and everything else is kind of secondary, there's a lot of unforeseen circumstances that are going to happen. It was COVID this go around, it's going to be something else in a year from now or 10 years from now. And the way to best prepare for that is to have knowledge of everything that impacts your ecosystem. That's all your stakeholders. If you have knowledge of them, and so it's not like a foreign subject or object to your system, you can prepare for things proactively so that when they happen, it's not like, oh my gosh, I never considered my supply chain may be affected by this. You're already thinking about your supply chain. You already have close relationships with them, and they care about you even more than other people they're supplying to because you have all along been conversing with them and not just treating them like, there's not a human behind that company. So I think if you have these stakeholder principles in place, you build a more resilient business and you'll survive when a future unforeseen event happens.
Well, thank you. Sam, I know we've run over. Any comments, any feedback from you, or should I continue?
Well, I want to get into a subject about the dining culture in these kind of resorts and so on, but I think that's a very huge question. But Portia, could you just you talked about cuisine, there's not enough cuisines in the world, but what are the things that you are offering your guests when they're staying at your places? What are the options?
You're right that it's in and of itself, it's a huge topic. One of my biggest challenges is that I'm located on an island, and so of course everybody wants to eat seafood. And one of the most difficult things to sustainably source is seafood. If everybody who came to Cartagena ate seafood all 3 meals a day, Cartagena would run out of fish very, very quickly. So sustainable often isn't actually local. Our mentality and the work that our chef does is to work with ingredients that we can source locally. All of the animal protein that we serve in our businesses is from animals that weren't overfed antibiotics, that lived with 5 animal freedoms. But what he does with them is he creates dishes that are surprising and perhaps inspired by other cultures. So we work with local ingredients to give a surprise. And the reason we do that is quite simply because almost every other restaurant in our vicinity is serving Peruvian or Mexican food. And so we just didn't see the point of being yet another Peruvian or Mexican restaurant. But very keen to work with ingredients that we can source within a couple of hours of our city.
Yeah, there's a big trend now. I mean, I was just reading it on some of particularly in the United States and also here in Europe, of the plant-based cuisines, and there's some top restaurants being opened up, and the chefs who were traditionally thought that salt, mayonnaise, and butter it means better flavors, but they have come to a better idea that there's something else that can be done. Do you see there is a request or expectations from your customers that that this is something that might be happening in your area also?
What we find here is that if you don't have plant-based options on your menu, you lose business. But then when people get there, hardly anyone orders it. So they're almost lost leaders, but it's very often actually because you have a group that comes in or a family that's eating and somebody is vegan or vegetarian.
Yes.
And so they will choose the restaurant where they have options, and then they're only going to buy one of those options. And then you've got 4 or 5 people eating the meat or fish. I push quite hard for my kitchens to offer good plant-based items on the menu because I actually see it as a USP. Because in this city it's not done particularly well, but also because it does have the lowest carbon footprint in terms of food prep.
Good. Well, thank you. That's all I have.
Jake, question for you. How can we use technology to help move these principles about social responsibility forward and possibly pick up the pace?
Oh, good question. I'm not sure if I'm actually the best one to answer that. I'm not the most tech savvy individual, but I guess I would say from a tech perspective is maybe it's not a matter of catalyzing tech or in more a matter of let going of some of it, and not necessarily everyone wants to make it easier, everyone wants to make it more efficient, or and I don't know if that's necessarily always conducive to creating experiences or travel that is deep and meaningful. So in terms of creating social justice and social change, I think it's important that people are informed, and have access to information that allows them to potentially shift their mindsets, their perspectives, and sort of get away from some of those old out of date worldviews and perspectives. But going back into what Portia said, I think it's really important to create space, and not have it be about guilting and shaming, and really about healing and growth. Because without these hard conversations, we're not going to see us evolve in the way that we absolutely need to. So if we can integrate tech into apps that allow us to be more informed, perhaps while we're traveling, and confident and courageous and ready to have a conversation that potentially is challenging for self and others, then I think that would be a beautiful way to engage it.
Fantastic. If nothing else, it'll be a reminder because all of us are almost umbilically connected to our devices these days. But one last question for all three of you, and Jared, I'm going to start with you before we close the session. One takeaway for our viewers, if you were to pick one.
I would say one takeaway is the world has already changed and it's going to continue to change. We are living in a new norm. In that new norm, the way business used to be performed is going to fail. It failed over these last 2 years. It's going to continue to do so. So for anyone thinking, I just didn't want to get back to where I was 2 years ago, it's a failed logic and you're not setting yourself up properly for the future. I would say embrace what has happened, learn from it, make changes within your business that speak to the new world that we're a part of, and your business will be future-proofed and successful.
Thank you. Jake, from your point of view, one takeaway.
I'd say that, I believe that values shape society. And I think travel is as an opportunity for us to cultivate new values or nurture existing values, and I think for those in the trade and those that are in travel have a unique opportunity to shape and nurture values within travelers, and within the trade, and ultimately that leads to shaping our society. But that does require a shift from left brain thinking to right brain, and bringing in more wisdom and to an intuitive sense and creativity in order to see those shifts and open up to, I think, the real potential and power of travel to bring transformational change to our world.
Thank you. And Portia, you get the last word.
I always feel like it's the hardest going last. I would say that whoever you are, consumer, business owner, traveler, human, and especially if you aren't a middle-aged white man, you have more power than you know, and you can play a role in shaping the world that you want to live in and the world that you want your children to live in. And you can start small and do the simplest of smallest of things, and make a tiny change. And if you all do that, if we all do that, the world will shift, and you will play a role in it. Don't give up, and don't think that the man is in charge, because as Jared says, the world is shifting and it's in our hands.
Well, thank you for that. Hopefully today's discussion has helped our viewers and us better understand why we all have to refocus our activities on alignment with social responsibility and provide a systemic process for bringing coherence and discipline to business strategies. Our gratitude, Jared Meyers with Legacy Vacation Resorts, Portia Hart with Blue Apple Beach House, and Jake Haupert with Transformational Travel Council. You know, I read this line and I'm stealing it. Some wise person has said that we need to aspire to inspire before we expire. And I think that's a very well said, even though it's a bit of a tongue twister, but I think it's very well said. And quite candidly, Hospitality Talks is merely that. We hope that these kind of conversations will inspire people to do different things. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to all our viewers. Sam.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the discussion with the panelists today. It was something I learned so much about it, and just kudos to Portia for all your efforts in your destination. It's I highly respect what you're doing, and all the best. And Jake, I also learned so much from you, and Jared, fantastic things that you're doing with this, getting people getting more responsible and certified, which is I just read that Portia said that it's a challenge, but it's a huge opportunity for growth when you go through the process of applying for a B Corp certification. So I think more and more destinations and resorts need to take this seriously, because the customers will be watching you. But let's just end with this fantastic discussion. So I'd like to thank again everyone. And if you were watching live, just, well, we don't mind if you subscribe and put the thumbs up for us that you were here. And also if you're watching it replay, because there are many more people who are watching this as a replay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time for joining us. And we also, this session will also be possible to listen as a podcast at the Hospitality Talks podcast. So all of you, thank you very much for joining, and please join us again for future sessions. We have many more things coming up about the future of hospitality.
Thank you.